Do the Mets have a Juan Soto problem, and why are they making him miserable? What should be different for Caitlin Clark in her second season? And oh dear God, what did the Knicks just do? It's all next on a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. We are off and running this fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Welcome in. Tons to talk about on this episode 9. We'll get into the Juan Soto situation and why smiles always seem to go missing in Flushing with the Mets. The WNBA has a Caitlin Clark problem, and it's not what you think. And we're going to be joined by Tony Calatayud, better known as 10-Day Tony from the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz, and find out if it's possible for a Miami Heat fan to actually be pulling for the Knicks in this year's playoffs. But we got to start with the headline. And the headline is obviously, what the hell was that? What happened to the Knicks last night? Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Knicks and the Pacers. And if you ever wanted to look up the definition of an absolute choke job, the Knicks gave you video proof last night, blowing a 17-point lead against the Pacers, blowing a 14-point lead with 2:41 to go. 2 minutes and 41 seconds away from being 7 wins away from an NBA title. It all went wrong in all the worst ways. Knicks were up 14 with 2:41 left. They led by 8 with 41 seconds to go. They blew those leads. They got fortunate. Tyrese Halliburton looked like he hit a 3 at the end of regulation. Turned out to be a 2. So the game went to overtime. So another chance to kind of reset, get your bearings, and get back, put the foot back on the gas. And overtime where the Knicks had a lead, they led by 4 at one point, and they go on to lose. So for all the younger fans who never got to experience the 90s, you have now gotten to experience, my friends, one of the worst losses in the history of the organization. This one goes down as an absolute gut punch of a loss. Brutal, just whatever word you want to use to describe it. Teams that were up 14 points in the final 250 of a playoff fourth quarter had been 977-0 until last night. Teams up 9 or more in the final minute had been 1,414-0 until last night. So in terms of your Knick fandom, move over Reggie Miller, move over Charles Smith, the Patrick Ewing finger roll, the John Starks 2 for 18. Last night's game absolutely is on the list of the worst playoff losses in the history of the Knicks organization. They had a 99.7% win percentage and just a complete choke job. I don't know what other words embarrassing, disgraceful, sickening, vomit-induced. If you're sitting there watching that, and I'll be honest, I'm recording this right after the game, and I almost feel like it's still a blur. Even saying that the Pacers won that game doesn't feel right. So I have some quick thoughts about that Game 1 loss. The first one is, be prepared now, because Game 2 is not until Friday. Be prepared for 2 days of Knick fans crying about Tibbs. Fire Tibbs. It is so dumb. It is so predictable. Here's my question. How many free throws did Tibbs miss last night? How many turnovers did Tibbs have in the fourth quarter? Did Tibbs tell the team, hey, you know what? Stop defending the three-pointers. Just let them shoot three-pointer after three-pointer. And look, when it's a bad loss like that, everyone has to own that, including the coach. But, you know, the overwhelming blame is going to be on the coach and almost exclusively on the coach, and it's stupid. People, oh, you know what? It's Tibbs' way. He never learns. They were tired. Brunson played 38 minutes total, including the overtime, had a long rest in that fourth quarter when the Knicks were building up that lead. He hit a 3, I think, to put it to 14, but they built up that lead with him on the bench. Karl Anthony Towns played 39 minutes in total, including the overtime. That was not physical fatigue. That was a mental letting off the gas. And again, nobody is blameless in this situation, but the Knicks fan discourse about Tibbs every single time that there's a loss or something goes wrong, it's always, always, always that the coach gets the overwhelming blame. And I'm not telling you he's blameless, but it's a total, it took everything for the Knicks to do wrong in that game. So nobody is without blame. So if you want to include the coach in that, fine. But Jalen Brunson's in that. OG Anunoby's in that. Karl Anthony Towns is in that. They're all in it. It's a team loss and a brutal loss at that. There's plenty of blame to go around. Don't just focus on the coach. All right. The second thing is people will say, well, what are the Knicks? How did the Knicks respond to this? What did they learn from? I don't really think there's anything to learn from this. The Pacers needed like 15 things to all go their way late in the fourth quarter and in the overtime, and they basically all went their way. So if we can agree this is an all-time collapse, I don't think that there are lessons to learn from. It's brutal to live through, but I don't think that there's anything that the team didn't already know. Like they know they have to play 48 minutes for whatever reason, and an extra 5 with the overtime, but they didn't do that. They let their foot off the gas. They took kind of, they didn't keep the intensity they needed to close that game out. I think they know they can't take the Pacers for granted. I think they know you have to close out the game, but they just didn't do that for for whatever reason. And it was an absolute miracle for the Pacers to be able to pull that off. And they had to do everything right over those last 3 minutes. And credit to them, they were able to do everything right. But I don't look at this as some omen of the series. It's a terrible loss, but it's one game, and it's the first game. So if you're ever going to come back from a brutal, terrible performance, it's probably better it's game one because you have more time to recover, and now you have to respond on Friday night. And then I guess the third thing that jumps out to me right away, just reading the tweets and listening to a little bit of the fan and just different things around on social media, the amount of fans who are already giving up. It's over. They blew it. How are they ever going to recover from this? How do you come back from this? How do you come back from this? It's the playoffs. How does the Knicks team respond to adversity? I don't know. It seems like they respond to adversity pretty well. And you know what? If you had to devise a thing where game 2 was the only important game, losing game 1 the way they did in such gross fashion, and kind of makes me more confident that they will win game 2, because that, and they know this, is a must win. Not mathematically, but emotionally and mentally, they must win on Friday night. I believe they'll show up. I believe they'll punch back, because if they don't, then all this talk that we've been spreading around for the last month or so about the gritty Knicks and all this heart and all this New York toughness, it was all just noise. It was all just BS. So we're going to find out real quick what this Knicks team is made of. And I, for one, am betting on a response. All right, our guest on this episode of Gordon Damer on Sports, you know him from, I don't know what, the biggest sports talk show in the country, the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz. Our guy whose 10-day contract has turned into a full-time gig. It is 10-day. Tony, dude, thanks for giving us a couple of minutes, man.
Gordon, appreciate it, man.
All right, so let's get into the show a little bit, because I am interested in this. You've worn a lot of different hats on the show. Tell me the story about how you get to the Dan Le Batard Show.
So funny enough, it's kind of a crazy story, and it involves like my personal life with my health. So I was working at ESPN, and I was in their production for podcasting and stuff and digital audio. And I was living in Connecticut at the time. I'm born and raised in Miami. So I grew up listening to Dan and the show. And I remember being in Connecticut, watching the show, being like, man, like, I wish I can go back and somehow through the ESPN family, like, make it back to Miami and work for the show and work for the guys. So I'm hanging out in mid-October. I'm watching a Sunday night football game on my couch, me and just my apartment alone in Connecticut. And it's starting to get cold. I'm a Miami kid. So I'm like, what is this freezing cold weather? It's October. How is it 18 degrees already? So I got my shirt off, just, hanging out on the couch, like with my arms behind my head. And I kind of look over my armpit, and I have like a bit of a bump underneath my arm. And I kind of look at it and I'm like, that's weird. And then I check my other side and I don't have it there.
Always have to check to see if it's on the other side. It makes you feel better if you have two of them for whatever reason.
Exactly. So I check the other side. It's not there. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So I give a call to my mom and I'm like, hey, just want to let you know this is going on. I don't really know kind of what to do. And she's like, all right, why don't you come back home? We'll get it checked out at the doctor that you go to, and we can kind of figure out what's going on. So I do that. I head back down to Miami, and the doctor kind of takes one look at me and is like, that's not, I was 28 at the time, 27, 28. He's like, 27, 28-year-old dudes do not have whatever that is. So that's kind of odd. We should probably get it checked out somewhere else. So they sent me over to another doctor, and the doctor was like, yeah, I think that I don't want to, speak out of school here. We haven't done any testing or anything, but that looks like cancer.
Wow.
We're all like, what? They're like, yeah, we're going to have to run a biopsy to be sure. But that is very common in patients that have lymphoma. They have their swelling underneath the armpit, where you have your lymph nodes underneath your arm, behind your ears, on your groin, things like that. Like, that's pretty accurate for what it is. So we end up getting a biopsy, and sure enough, it was lymphoma. And at this point, we're like, okay, wow, I've been working at ESPN for a year and some change. I was working local radio down in Miami, and then I got the call to go up to ESPN. It's like, wow, I'm living in ESPN. I'm living my dream. I'm doing my thing. And I had to come back home to Miami and start getting treatment. They ended up taking out the lymph node that was the tumor, essentially. And I'm working at ESPN, remote. And my bosses at ESPN obviously knew that I was from Miami, knew that I had an affinity for the show. And the show was starting to branch out and create new side podcasts. Dan's, interview series, South Beach Sessions, Mystery Crate, Stugotz, Stupidity. They needed help with production of those different properties. And my boss, Pete Giannissini, who I love and is no longer at ESPN, but he's given me everything that I have now. He was like, hey, why don't you call Mike Ryan and kind of hook up with them and see what they need to help, as you're down there already, and you can kind of figure stuff out. And that was March or April of 2019. So I start going into the show every day. I start helping him with the podcast. Things hit the fan with COVID. I kind of become more and more entrenched. And since then, after, during COVID, all the stuff that happened with ESPN and Dan and them, I had to stay for 6 months at ESPN while they were figuring stuff out as they had left before the DraftKings deal. Once they signed the DraftKings deal, I got brought over, and I've been there ever since. So it's been a crazy ride of, personal health battles and journeys, but it's put me exactly where I need to be in the right time. And it's been a crazy ride, Gordon. Not gonna lie.
Absolutely. That's a wild way to get there, right? But look, however you get there, that's all that matters.
Exactly.
So I know the background for the nickname 10-Day Tony was supposed to be, you're like on a 10-day contract. When you first heard that nickname, did it make you feel good? Hey, I've got a nickname. They're going to be keeping me around. Or how did you feel about when you first got the nickname? And did you think it would be something that would live this long?
So to be honest, it was kind of like a twofer, right? It actually happened because of some of the guys on the show, and our social media guru Juju Gotti was, just combing social media and saw. So I play basketball here in Miami, and I played in JUCO a little bit, ended up getting my knees messed up, my ankles. So I ended up walking away, going the sports media route. But I have a pretty good jump shot, and I play very often, very frequently in a bunch of leagues down here in Miami. So they started seeing like, oh, wait a second, like he's got a good jumper, like he can hoop a little bit. And they kind of gave me the moniker 10-Day Tony, as that like, oh, he's good enough to get a 10-day contract somewhere at the same time of having this stint with the show. But then it just stuck as a brand. Like for me, 10-Day Tony allows everybody to know, like, yeah, I can hoop, I can play, I know what I'm kind of doing, and it just sounds good. So it's been kind of like a parallel growth of my brand, but also the ability to like, yo, I can still hoop. I guess I still got the jumper, Gordon. I don't know if we can go out and shoot. We can play horse.
There you go. The show has this kind of like the reputation of being unpredictable or off the wall. Given that you have an on-air role, how do you prepare for something that seems to be, at least to the outsider, kind of unpreparable?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I like to say is we are a comedy show disguised as a sports show. And of course, we go in like every sports show would go into. We've got the topics from the night before of whatever happened in, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, whatever season it is. And we've kind of got our tentpole situations of, okay, we're going to talk NBA playoffs. We're going to talk NFL. We're going to talk, MLB. We're going to talk whatever. And then kind of what we call the show kind of evolves around that. So are you watching Last of Us?
Yes, I am.
HBO.
I'm a couple episodes behind after that. The big plot reveal in episode 2. I have not caught up as of yet. I'm not sure that I'm still interested in the show after that plot twist. I don't know how effective it was. A great plot twist, but I don't know how good it is for the long-term growth of the show. But yes, long story short, yes, I am still watching the show. Agreed.
It's going to be different for the, yes. the next couple of episodes. But the what I'm going to equate it to is essentially the cordyceps. You know how they grow and they kind of like consume everything that's around it. That's kind of what the show does, right? And what we call the show is just off the wall conversations that we'll be talking about sports, and then somebody says a random stray, and then it's like, oh, hat, that hat is great. I love the Mariners hat or whatever. And then it devolves into, oh, what hats are in the Hat Hall of Fame? Oh, Santa Claus's hat. This hat, that hat, Bear Bryant's hat. Like all these things happen, and kind of the cordyceps go around the topics. And then at the end, you kind of look back from a 30,000 foot view and be like, how the hell did we talk about
how do we get there?
The Hat Hall of Fame, what people in sports sound like serial killers, right? John David Booty, like all these random topics. There's no way to prepare for it. The best way is to, and what I've realized and noticed after being with the show for the last six or some odd years, is these guys have been all doing it together since the early 2000s, right? So they're very sharp in the windows of, here's a stray joke I'm going to throw in there to make Dan laugh. Here's a comment. Here's this. Here's that. So it almost creates like a very like you have to be sharp when you're in there, and it's tough for some people that have never been a part of what the Double Dutch is, as far as the Le Batard Show, to get in and then hear 8 different conversations from 8 different people happening at the same time, but it all works in melody together. So it's a really cool, really interesting way to do sports, right? And you're from the natural school of, we're doing sports, we're talking about these topics, we're going to give good stuff, good stats, good analysis, analytics, in a sense where that's kind of what I grew up into, obviously listening to the Le Batard Show. So having that ability to, one day I think I could do that, but grew up with, regular sports radio down in Miami, and then going to the ESPN route, very polished, very professional, this is how we do things. I've worked with Zach Lowe, with, Schefter, with Windhorse, with Bomani Jones, with you name it. Like whoever was doing podcasts at ESPN at that time, like I was working with them and I had a hand in either production or helping them do stuff. So it was such a different world when you step in and you're expected to, all right, start jumping, double dutch, boom, boom, boom. All right, this guy's in, you're out. So it's been fun and a blessing. And I think it's sharpened me a lot for kind of what I feel like would be next in my career, as I evolve kind of in the media game.
Now, you came into this as a sports fan, and when you are a sports fan, it's hard to leave that behind. I think that you still identify yourselves as a diehard sports fan, but you also interview a lot of athletes, a lot of people involved in the sports. Has there ever been someone that you went into it thinking, I hate this guy, I hate this team, but you now find yourself almost maybe rooting for them, or your perception has changed based on your interactions with them one-on-one?
For sure. So I do a lot of stuff with UFC. I kind of hold down our UFC coverage at Meadowlark Media, and fighters are interesting in the sense of like the wrestling, the theatrics of the UFC is interesting in a sense where you see what these guys are off cage, and you're like, oh, like interesting. And then you see them on cage, in the cage, very much on and pretending to be their character. And I'll tell you the inverse of that, right? And I'll give you your example in a second. The people that you interview from the UFC, you would think have a certain, crass about them, have a certain like edge. And every UFC fighter that I've interviewed, and I've interviewed 10 to 15 in the last couple of years, UFC champions, people that have gone on to be UFC champions, and they're all the nicest people.
Yeah, right.
You would figure like somebody would
this
be.
Guy's gonna, don't mess up with this guy.
On this podcast.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know.
It's somebody like you figure somebody's going to be a dick at some point. You kind of meet people and you're like, oh, like surprisingly nice guy.
Yeah.
Surprisingly nice lady. Interesting. You'd figure with that edge of fighting people for money that you would kind of be a little edgy. But I would tell you it's not so much people that I've talked to one-on-one. It's teams and situational awareness of, I was never a Knicks fan growing up, right? I'm a Miami Heat guy.
Obviously.
Knicks were always, even though I'm of the generation in that gap of where the Knicks were bad for 25 years. So I'm 33.
Right.
Like
They've never been good.
The Allen Houston shot, I was 8 years old, right? Like I was still starting to realize, oh, people are moving and the basketball's going in the basket. Like, oh, I get this. This is cool.
Right.
So I didn't understand the implications of that Allen Houston shot, but the Knicks were never a thought for us people in my generation. It's like, oh, we're going to beat the Knicks and the Knicks are terrible. And like, it is what it is. So I've actually had, and a buddy of mine who's a producer on the show, Taylor Viplis, who has the song of the summer, by the way, Jalen Brunson. You need to go check that out. We played it on the show this past week. He's a diehard New York Knicks guy, New York guy. He's the Yankees guy. So it's like, I get all of my New York takes from him. He's listening to the shows up there. He's very plugged in. And he was telling me, I got Jalen Brunson pilled very early in the process, right? Obviously, I follow hoops. I understand. I was like, man, the Mavericks are going to let go Jalen Brunson. I thought he was pretty good for them. Like, okay, we'll see how this works in New York. Can he be a number one? I don't think so. Like, we've never seen that except in Villanova, but this is the NBA. This is a totally different situation. And then all of a sudden they started building this team where it was like, okay, added Josh Hart, added, Dante DiVincenzo was there. I like Hartenstein. Like, Mitchell Robinson's a pretty good defender. Like, oh, wait a second. The Knicks are kind of interesting. And I was getting this Jalen Brunson pill of like, he's the best clutch player in the league. He's incredible in the fourth quarter. And I'm like, yeah, I think he is the best player in the league in clutch time. Wait a second.
Yeah.
Something is going on here. So I have an affinity. I like the Knicks, right? And I know it's sacrilegious to say as a Miami Heat fan, but I think Jalen Brunson, for what his deficiencies are, he's overcome them in such a great way to basically the Gordon, and see if this is kind of the pulse for New York right now. It feels like, even though he has deficiencies somewhat on defense, he's not big, he's not particularly fast, right? He's lefty, so that creates a bit of a different angle when you're defending him when he's trying to get to the hoop. It just feels like he's in this rare air of like, and I'd be interested to see what your comp would be to this question. Who's the player that no matter what, you think he's going to get it done? Because that's where Jalen Brunson lives right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's the guy that's like, no matter what, Jalen's going to get a shot off. He's going to hit up an important three. He's going to get an and one somewhere that you really need it. It just feels like he's always getting it done. And
usually in the NBA, that's tied to athleticism, right? Like some guy who's just a physical freak, either big or fast or whatever it is. It's not generally somebody who you look at and, as you mentioned, smallish, not great on D. There are deficiencies in his game, but just don't tell Knick fans that because they don't want to hear it. And look, I'll be the first to tell you, even Knick fans are surprised that Brunson has turned into this. Now, he's been this for the last couple of years, so it's all well and good to make it out like now. No, we knew that this was the Brunson we were getting this entire time. Even the over negativity of a lot of the national media, Knick fans were happy. Hey, we got a point guard. This guy can actually be a point guard. Knicks hadn't had a point guard in 20 years. But anybody who tells you they knew that Brunson would turn into what he has turned into, I don't even think Rick Brunson knew that Jalen would turn into this. So, all right. So you mentioned you're a Heat guy. Is Heat culture dead now? I mean, it kind of feels like they're in the worst kind of situation where they can kind of be good, but that's the worst spot to be in the NBA. And with Riley, I think he's 80 years old now. Will they ever take a step back to take 2 steps forward in an offseason?
It feels like if there is any time to do that, this is the time, right? Like, I think for as tumultuous and as kind of just disgusting the last year went for the Miami Heat, as far as Jimmy in the offseason being like, hey, I'm not happy. Like, I don't want to do this. The organization, obviously, as you know, Gordon, it's like, it's the most strong arm organization in the NBA. Like, if they say something, it's going to happen one way or the other. And they kept telling Jimmy, like, the extension's not happening, buddy. Like, you're going to play out your contract. And like, that's what's going to happen, with the eye of they've seen him at his best right? They've seen him in the bubble take a Miami Heat team to a championship and lose to LeBron and AD and play incredible in that stretch. They've seen him go from a play-in 8 seed to make the championship yet again and lose to the greatest player we've ever seen at that size in Nikola Jokic. So they've kind of seen the best of Jimmy. So this year, with the roster that they had, they were kind of looking around and being like, all right, we'll see what happens if he can pull another rabbit out of his hat. We're betting that that's not going to be the case. And that's why we're not going to extend him past what his contract is. And as it was going through the season, you know, there was murmurs and there was rumblings down here that like, hey, Jimmy's not happy. Like this is about to turn into something that Jimmy does quite often in all of his stays, you know, Chicago, Minnesota, Philadelphia, wherever. It's like, he's gonna put a blowtorch to this, and it's not gonna be pretty. You know, he'd end up suspending him. You know, all the situations that happen. He gets traded to Golden State. It feels like, especially from what we saw, even though there was a bit of fool's gold and a bit of a mirage in the desert with Golden State once they traded him for those like a 20 game stretch where they were like 16-4, where Jimmy was playing out of his mind, where Steph and everything was clicking and Draymond and everything was moving. You're like, oh wow, wait a second. The Heat kind of didn't see this, or he still has stuff left in the tank. And then you see him get hurt in that in one of those first games in the first series and kind of not be himself. And then a lot of the national media was asking, especially in the series against Minnesota, why is Jimmy only taking 9 shots in a de facto elimination game? Because if you go down 3-1, it's over. No Steph. Why'd you take 9 shots? And then in an elimination game, you're going to take 13 shots. You're a guy making $60 million a year next year, and you're taking 11 shots, 13 shots. So it feels like there's a bit of a win, Gordon, in the sense that the Heat kind of saw that and got off it in a way that at least they could recoup something. The you know, Andrew Wiggins piece, you know, like you said, you're stuck in a point of mediocrity where you're looking around at the pieces you have. Bam Adebayo, who's an all-star, very good defensive player. Tyler Hero, who's a great offensive player. And it's like, that's not going to be enough. Now, the hope for every Heat fan since 2010 has been, we're going to go out and get the whale. We're going to go out and get the biggest piece available on the board, and Riley's going to make it happen. Even though there has been many, many, many years that Heat fans have been left wanting more in that situation, we still feel like Giannis is there. Heat fans are like, go get him. It doesn't matter who it takes. Give him Bam, give him Tyler, give him whoever you want. We don't care. We just need the biggest fish in the pond. So it feels like, Gordon, there's a tiny glimmer of hope, a glimmer, just tiny, like a shimmer in the eye that Giannis could be in black and red next season. We'll see. And if not, it's one of those moments where, all right, we've got to really take account of what we have here, of the rookies, of the young players that we have, if there's other moves to be made on the board. But it's always exciting to be a Heat fan because the fact that you hope that there's one Hail Mary that Riley can throw and land one more big fish.
So let me get this straight. Are you, of the teams that are remaining, are you rooting for the Knicks to win a championship?
I think
or are you just an observer?
I'm an observer, but we're also in the sports media landscape, and you know as well as I know that a Knicks championship would be massive. Would be massive. We would feed on that till football season.
Yeah.
Right? Like that would be the biggest story in sports basically, and land us straight into the NFL in August. What I think of with these 4, I'm intrigued by storylines. Obviously, being in the business, we have to create storylines. I'm intrigued by every team with a narrative, right? And I think all 4 teams have narratives. Anthony Edwards, can he get over the hump? He's been regarded as this great player, as this next generation superstar. Can he get over the hump with a pretty good team? And from what we saw in game 1, they're still a little bit ways away from Oklahoma City, who's now the next great team with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, with Chet Holmgren, with J-Dub, all these guys who are the next young core. Can this be the Warriors of the 2020s, right? Is this the next team up that can go for 5, go for 6 championships? Who knows if they can stay together with the second apron and the way the CBA is structured now? That's a whole different story, but that's theirs. Indiana, I feel like nobody wants Indiana to be in the title or to win.
Yeah.
But they have an interesting storyline. Rick Carlisle getting back into the big dance. Halliburton, his story, his dad, the way that Indiana plays 10 guys. Like there's interesting things. And then New York has the best storyline of all. 50 years since you won a championship, New York has been foaming at the mouth for a good team in the city. And now with every win and every series, right, from the first round to the semis, now the Eastern Conference Finals, New York is just getting more and more hyped. And it just feels like there's an explosion waiting to happen. So if you wanted me to rank them, I'd probably say in order of storylines, what I'm rooting for: New York 1, Anthony Edwards 2, OKC 3, Indy 4.
And especially just from the Knick point of view, it's set up perfectly for like the revenge tour. You've already ousted the Celtics, which most of myself included, did not think going into that series the Knicks were going to be able to win that series.
No.
And then to take out a Pacers team that took you out last year, and then the potential, I know it doesn't look great right now, of Minnesota with Julius Randle and DiVincenzo there, it really is set up. And Knick fans, I think that they are belligerently optimistic is the way I would put it. And to see them now 8 games from something that I think a lot of them may have convinced themselves was not possible in their lifetime. The city is, it's unlike anything else in the city because the Knicks are the team that unites the city. It's the one, everybody in New York, if you're a basketball fan, you're a Knicks fan. The Nets technically are here, but
they're Jersey.
Yeah, they've always been Jersey, so it's always going to be their way. All right, let's talk a little UFC. That's something that I've gotten into. My son is super into it. Nice. So we got UFC 316 coming up here in Jersey and the rematch between Merab and Sean O'Malley. That last matchup, I guess it was September, O'Malley just seemed to be completely overmatched. Is there any reason to think it's going to be different this time?
Unfortunately, no. Right? Here's the thing. I think I'm trying to think of the number, but it was UFC at the Sphere. It was Noche UFC in the Sphere. And it was Merab versus Sean O'Malley. And obviously Sean O'Malley has been lighting fire to the bantamweight division when, he comes out of nowhere and just starts winning and knocks out Aljamain Sterling in Boston. And it was like, oh, wow, this is his division now. He's young enough. He was, I think at the time, 26, 27. He's young enough where he can go on a pretty massive run in the bantamweight division that doesn't have a ton of killers in it, has really good prospects and some guys that were solid. But, it felt like O'Malley's time was here and he was going to be a multi-time champion in that division. And then all of a sudden the machine comes out, Merab Dvalishvili, and it was like, oh, this dude is different. This dude does not have an off switch, right? And he's great where Sean O'Malley isn't, on the ground, right? Merab comes from this Georgian background of Georgian wrestling, and it's the pressure that he puts on his opponents in a way where it's like he's not great on his feet. I think he's a average boxer, average striker, but his gas tank is double that of yours, right? So it's like you go into this fight knowing, all right, he's going to be pedal to the metal 24/7. He's going to try and take me down 8,000 times in the next 5 rounds. And it's not that I don't think O'Malley didn't know that, right? Like he's got great coaches. He's a great fighter as far as the mental standpoint. It's just when you cannot stop somebody from taking you down, there's nothing you could do. There is nothing you could do. So I hope that Sean has been practicing, takedown.
Got to look at it, right? Yep.
Being able to get up off the ground when you are on the floor, on the mat, on the canvas. And it's like trying to get out of that is what drains that gas tank, right? You have somebody who's wearing you like a backpack. You can't get him off. All of a sudden your gas tank's depleted because you've been trying to get him off you for the last 3 minutes of the round and you can't. So that fight's going to be tough. Unless Sean gets him, and again, he's very long for a bantamweight, so he can stand out of the pocket and direct shots from further back in a way that Merab would have to kind of step into his zone to be able to strike with him. It feels like if O'Malley can have, and he's got dynamite knockout power, if he can get Merab early, like it feels like he can land one that can at least stun him and then he can take him down and try to hammer fist him and finish him out. If it goes the distance, there's no way in my mind that it can be nobody other than Merab Dvalishvili with the title again, because there's just no evidence to support that Sean O'Malley has fixed his ground game. And I like Sean. I've seen Sean in person. I saw him at the Cheeto fight in Miami. Like he threw a devastating knee to Cheeto that hit him in the right here in the orbital bone, and it sounded like a back crack. It sounded like Juan Soto hitting a home run in the stadium, and we were like, "Oh my God, where did that come from?" So he's an incredible fighter. I'm just worried that his ground game it hasn't caught up to where the excellence of Merab is.
You brought up Juan Soto. I know you're not technically like a big baseball guy, but that's been the big story here in New York about the fact that you talk about being exhausted. It seems like Soto is already exhausted 2 months into a 15-year contract. Thoughts about that?
I think that Juan Soto, going from all his different stints at other clubs, especially when he was with the Yankees, I think he's, from a baseball perspective, like his mind is like a computer when it comes to hitting, right? Like every pitch, he knows kind of, all right, I'm going to take this one off. I'm going to foul this one back. Like, oh, that was his best stuff. Let me do this. Let me do that. It just feels like he was happy in with the Yankees. He was happy in pinstripes. And from what I've seen, from what the Yankees offered, from what the Mets offered, and from a dollars perspective, right? It was $5 million of difference
over 15, 16 years.
Over 15, 16 years that you lose in New York City in taxes either way. Right.
Absolutely.
But it felt like the extra perks of, we're going to get the private jet, we're going to get the suite for the family, we're going to do all these things, that Soto was like, okay, it's what's the worst that can happen? Instead of going to the Bronx, I'm going to go to Queens. I'm going to wear a different uniform. I get to live in the same place. I get to do the same things. My routine doesn't change. It's not like I'm going to Seattle, right across the country. My family lives in Dominican Republic. I have people over there. We had a long flight. It's New York, Dykeman. You know, everybody loves the Dominican lifestyle. But like, it's just weird that 50 games in, we're already worried about hustle. And let me be clear. I love pimp jobs on home runs. I love strutting your stuff when you hit a monster shot. Was it unfortunate that it happened in Boston, where the Green Monster didn't allow that to be a home run, and any other park it would have been, 480 feet?
Right.
So it's like, do I give him a pass for this one specific thing? Yes, because that's happened to a bunch of people, Gordon. You've seen that happen 1,000 times in Boston, where I've got a hold of this one. I know it's gone. Oh, wow, it hit off the top. I'm at first base. I should have probably legged it out if I would have ran for a double, but alas, here we are. So I think it's more of the microcosm of New York Mets fans seeing his unhappiness already and tying that one result to the entire process of what's going on with the Mets. It just, to you, right? If you were Juan Soto, they gave you everything you wanted.
Yeah.
You got the money.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at 15 years. And it feels, instead of being this great 15-year stretch, it feels like he's doing 15 at Rikers.
It does. It's amazing. For that amount of money, you would figure that there would be some joy. And, to me, it's not even the hustle thing, because with Soto and a lot of players, hustle's not always there, right? Most guys are not breaking it out of the box. Mm-hmm. It's just that his personality, he used to have such a joy. And when he was with the Yankees, it felt like every night he was smiling, he was happy. Mm-hmm. And look, maybe that is based on performance. I'd like to think that he's not having a prototypical Juan Soto start to the season. It's not that far off, but I'd like to think that that's what it's tied into, and not just his situation, because how bad could the situation be that 2 months in, this is not like year 2, it's, 60 days. And all of a sudden the smile that could not be wiped off his face last year has not really appeared all that much lately.
Do you think it's a byproduct of looking across his lineup and his teammates with the Yankees?
I'm not sure. I think that maybe he thought that there's been reports that he was kind of convinced by other people to go. And that certainly has been a case with Scott Boras clients in the past. Mm-hmm. You take the most money, you're redefining the market. And maybe that's part of what came up. I'm not sure. I'll be interested. Look, it can't stay this way for long. One thing I'm very confident in this situation is that Juan Soto is going to turn into Juan Soto at some point. And when that now, look, it might not be this year. Francisco Lindor, that first year with the Mets, but he was coming from Cleveland. It was a completely different situation. You would think, as you said, New York to New York. It can't be that much different, but it seems like it certainly has impacted him so far.
And I love watching him play, right? Like I thought that some of the most high level baseball was in this past year's World Series between the Dodgers and the Yankees. It was incredible watching Ohtani, watching Freeman, watching Judge, even though he didn't have a great, series and dropped that one fly ball. Watching Soto do his thing. Like, it was just such high level baseball in a way that it feels like we haven't seen that, like those two titans, those two lineups, those players, right? Asian, Hispanic, American, like everything was there. It was like the perfect World Series from top to bottom, except for obviously the result for New York fans. But it just feels like you said, the happiness that in which we saw him play is now gone. And what I think of is he looking around, his Mets locker room and his Mets clubhouse and being like, damn, this whole thing is on me now. In a sense where when he was with the Yankees, there was a lot of, all right, Judge has got this. Stanton, when he plays and he plays well, he's got my back. Like, I'm here and I can kind of be great behind these two guys. And now he's looking around and with the Mets and he's like, it looks like it's just me for the long haul.
All right, some football stuff. Unfortunately, you and I share a significant team in the Dolphins. I will argue that Stephen Ross is the worst owner in the NFL.
You sound like my brother-in-law.
Oh my! I mean, the guy is a real world genius, obviously. But in terms of the NFL, he is a bobo. Is there any hope that the Dolphins are going to win anything significant as long as he remains the owner?
No.
Okay.
And that's a short and simple answer, but it just feels like the Dolphins have a lot of deficiencies. And I think that it starts at quarterback. And I know that the market dictated you needed to give your starting quarterback, $200+ million. And that's what Tua got. And he deserved it after the season he had with Mike McDaniel. But it feels like the Mike McDaniel system has been kind of calibrated against by other defenses and other head coaches, in a sense where when it first happened, it was like, wow, this is the greatest thing since, the greatest show on turf Rams. Like, Tyreek Hill's just always open in the middle of the field somehow. Yeah. He's always just running like a deep in for 15 yards and getting 76 out of it. Okay, cool. This is a great offense. And then little by little, linebackers started heading back a little bit further back into the box to stop those deep ins. The running game was great because everybody was always worried about the pass. And then that kind of sputtered a little bit. The offensive line got injured. The offensive line isn't great. Defense was okay. And then all of a sudden, guys started falling off. Secondary's not great. Like, there's a lot of holes to be filled. And it just feels like, I don't want to say the gig is up for Mike McDaniel, but if he has another bad season where the Dolphins kind of sputter around 500 and don't win the division yet again, obviously the Bills are great, but they're beatable, as we've seen. It just feels like the writing's on the wall for McDaniel. And I don't know how you feel about that. I feel like the problem might be too early.
Yeah. I feel like the problems are so much bigger than that. I think he's a good coach, and I think that he'll learn from this experience, almost like you have to kind of go through it one time with a kind of a dysfunctional organization. And with Chris Greer there, it feels like a dysfunctional organization. And it feels like they're the only organization that could be tired of going 8-8 every year and tear it all down and rebuild and get all these draft picks and then build it back up to where they now go 9-8. You know what I mean? It's like, it's amazing. They're the one team that cannot get this right. And I put the blame at the foot of ownership, because and look, maybe the Knicks are an example of the owner it's just
getting
about picking
bad ownership.
They just have to pick the right guy, and maybe that's it. But if you told me, there's a lot of things I'm not good at. If you put me in charge of a nuclear power plant, I would not know the first thing about doing that. But if I were doing it for 20 years, like at this point, Stephen Ross has been the owner of the Dolphins for 20 years. Wow. I think I would be better at whatever the tasks are and picking people to fill those tasks than it seems like he is.
Are you a Tua guy?
Not really. I was not happy that they drafted him at the time. But again, that's where I think the whole thing kind of went sideways, that he was not going to be the right guy to lead that out. He was hurt in college. He's constantly hurt. That's a position you have to be able to depend on. If nothing else, you have to be dependable. And it feels like at this point, right, it feels like he's one big hit away.
He's always one big hit away.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be that big of a hit sometimes.
Right. The one against Buffalo, where he went for that first down and kind of went head first, and we saw him visibly shaken and the way that looked especially after the Cincinnati one, which was terrible, and then down the line, it just feels like the most coveted job for backups is Miami, right? Because you can go back there and be like, all right, there's a realistic shot.
Chances are you're going to get a chance to play at some time. Yeah, at some point. It might be. It might only be one game, but chances are it's probably going to be more.
And you look at that, and obviously they signed Zach Wilson, they got Quinn Ewers, like
not a great quarterback room.
not a great quarterback room, if you want me to be honest. It just feels like they had that moment where they were the most exciting offense in football with Waddle and Hill and Tua and Mostert, and it was like, oh wow, this is good, this is fun. And then it got reverted back to the offensive line sucks.
Yeah,
the offense is not great. Tyreek is not the Tyreek that we saw. Now he wants out, but now he's back in, but now he's having trouble off the field. But now it's like, Jalen Waddle, is he really the guy that could be a number 2? You've already paid him like he's a number 2, but it feels like he's kind of just Jarvis Landry with a bit of a better go ball.
Yeah, it's a mess of a situation.
And the division is really, just the Bills, right? In New York, like the Jet, like Justin Fields is.
This is the time where you should be closing the window, and the window feels like it's only getting wider.
Exactly. Patriots, I like what they did, but they're still young. They're still up and coming in the division. It feels like the Dolphins are. Can we count how many teams in the AFC are in a better situation than the Miami Dolphins right now? It feels like there's at least 7 to 8 teams that I'd rather be than Miami, and I feel like that's being generous. So you're already on the playoff bubble outside looking in just at the beginning of the season, and we haven't played a down of football yet.
And with the Dolphins, it feels like when it seems like things are bad, they're actually worse. It never feels like, oh, you know what? They actually surprised this year where there were no expectations. No, like whatever your expectations are, you're probably better off. Like the thing I've done now is my FanDuel account benefits, because I'm just like, you know what? I'd rather throw $50 on the Dolphins having a bad season and be wrong. I'll spend $50. I have no problem wasting and throwing money away just to see something in my lifetime. I'm become the old head now that is resigned to the fact they will never win anything. There have been 4 popes since the Dolphins last won a playoff game.
Oh my God. And they die. Remember, they don't get taken out like, oh, you're doing a great job. But
they're not retired. Oh, it's your term is up. No, you to death. Yes. So,
but it feels like that you're that way with the Knicks, and now you're on the doorstep of possibly you thought you would never see it in your lifetime, and all of a sudden,
yeah. But in some ways, that's more depressing as a Dolphin fan. Like even the Knicks have figured. Even James Dolan, this enemy number 1 of the New York sports fan, has been able to figure it out after 20 years. And you have Stephen Ross, who is not even remotely close to a clue. And I don't even think it doesn't seem like wins and losses are the things that really matter. Like he's more interested in hosting a Super Bowl than having his team be in the Super Bowl.
And you can tell with what he's done to the stadium, right? He's created a tennis complex. He's created the F1 complex. It's like, this used to mean Pro Player Stadium used to mean something. You used to share it with the Marlins, and it was 900 degrees and somebody hit a shot into the outfield, and then 11 people would try and get it because that's the only people that were in the stadium in the outfield was 11 people. Like that's when Miami used to play in the dirt. I remember they would play Oakland and it'd be Ricky Williams running in the outfield. And then he'd go into the infield and get dirt all over his jersey. Like fantastic. That's when football was football, Gordon.
Yeah, unfortunately. All right, so I'm taking the Panthers out of it. Hockey doesn't count. Miami championship. The next team in Miami to win a title is
the team you took out, the Panthers.
Yeah, well, no, I'm taking those out. You can't have them. That's too easy.
Yeah, no, it's too easy.
It would have to still be the Heat, right? I mean, they're not close, but at least they have a track record of success.
They do, but they're in such a dire strait right now with they need a bigger star than Bam and Tyler to kind of lead this team into what would be a championship run. Marlins are a joke. That doesn't count. Dolphins are not close. I would say, and this may come as a surprise, I feel like the Miami Hurricanes football team would be the closest. I think building on last year, obviously, when you have a Heisman Trophy #1 pick quarterback in Cam Ward, who hid all of your blemishes basically on defense for as long as he humanly could. They're getting their defense a little bit better. I think that their offensive line has turned into from a good to a great offensive line. We'll see how good Carson Beck, how good Carson Beck can be this season, which he wasn't. He was aided by an NFL roster at Georgia. but it feels like Mario Cristobal has things churning in the right direction. So I would say out of all the other teams, you're taking the Panthers out of it, the Canes have to be closest to winning a title, because once you get in the playoff, anything can happen, as we saw. It just feels like the Heat are not close. It feels like the Dolphins are even further than that. So I'd give you the Miami Hurricanes. And if you would have told me that at the beginning of, last season, that the Canes would be the closest team to win a title in Miami, I'd be like, sure. Okay.
Right.
But that's where we are right now with pro sports, outside of the Panthers, who are just dominant. And I'm not a hockey guy. I grew up in Miami. I'm a Hispanic Cuban American kid. Like, hockey was not even on my radar. It was basketball, baseball, football. And, I've gotten into, I'll watch the games and stuff. I'm trying to still figure out exactly what's going on, but
where's the puck?
Where the puck's there. What's the blue line? I don't know
right.
I don't know what the hell icing is. They call icing the goalie puts up his glove. I don't know.
All right.
But it's been fun. And obviously being in the media, it's all about narrative. It's all about how can we turn this into content? I feel like, Gordon, I don't know if that's happened. Obviously you've been a veteran of the game for a long time. I don't know if that's happened when that happened to you, where it's like, okay, I don't really care what happens as long as I have content for the next day.
Yeah. Well, look, outside of my teams, which unfortunately the Dolphins are one of them, and unfortunately they gave me far too much content. I don't want content from them anymore because it's all negative. But outside of my teams, that's all I care about. What's the best story? What's the thing I feel strongest about? And look, as you get older, generally you kind of pare down your fandom tree a little bit, so the content tree continues to grow. And I guess the final area we'll go into, has the content area impacted you in terms of Caitlin Clark and everything going on with the WNBA?
So I have a newbornish.
Congratulations.
Thank you. She's turning 5 months now, June 1st. So I've been very dedicated with watching my sports in my windows, because as you know, having a kid yourself,
right?
When
windows are always changing.
The first year, basically. So I'm almost halfway through the first year. I'm still trying. I'm like watching games like on YouTube, like the highlights of the game. I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what happened, because I was asleep or the baby was going nuts, and my wife's not going to be like, I'm not going to tell my wife, hey, babe, I got to watch this game real quick. If you can handle the crying baby who's teething, that'd be great.
I need the next 2.5 hours in solitude.
If you could.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're watching what? I'm watching, Indiana, New York. She's like, why do you care about that?
Yeah.
Like, don't worry about it. So I've been watching, I haven't been watching the games because I've just, it's crazy in my house right now, but I've been following what's been going on, and it's interesting, right? Like when are we going to get to the point, the tipping point of covering women's sports the way we do men's, where we don't really talk about the games in the W, right?
No.
Like we talk storylines.
I feel like that's very similar to the NBA, though. I feel like the NBA, the especially regular season, the games are the last thing that matters. It's the storylines, it's the stars, it's maybe a stat line from somebody from the last week or two. It's almost like there are no really important regular season games anymore. So I don't know that that's necessarily all that different in the WNBA.
In a shortened season, though, obviously the regular season games mean a little bit more.
Yeah,
you would figure. It's tough when you have somebody as dynamic as Caitlin Clark. It's hard for the media cycle to envelop other ladies from the sport when you have her in all the commercials, when she's the only thing that people are talking about from a mainstream media perspective. From the again, like you talk about, there's only so many storylines, so many narratives that we can put into a couple hour show, right? Especially when you're market dependent. Oh, we got to talk Knicks, we got to talk Yankees, we got to talk this, we got to talk that, and then we'll get to, oh, did you see what Caitlin Clark did? Because that's kind of the lifeline that we can be like, all right, boom, we have this. So I think there's a lot of great men and women covering the W in a way that we would cover other sports. We've never, it's never been part of the conversation.
No.
Now it is in such a big part, in such a big way, where these ladies are playing amazing. There's storylines, there's narratives, there's exciting players, there's rivalries, there's all these things that kind of didn't exist. And maybe they did, just not to the normal layman fan who's watching a couple, maybe one game a night, who's kind of following a couple teams a season, a year. So it's now that next evolution. I feel like they're also doing a great job on social media, where now the social media age is being able to digest these things just on TikToks, on reels, on clips that are 30, 90 seconds long. Where you'd be like, oh, wow, she did this, or look how these two teams played each other and this and that. So the Caitlin Clark thing is interesting from a phenomenon of she's bringing notoriety to the W in a way that hadn't been done before. And in your opinion, is she catching heat for that with other players?
I think that's only normal, right? Like if you're doing something and you've been doing it at the highest level that it can be done on whatever thing it is that you're doing, and then suddenly somebody comes in who's dynamic. Let's be honest. She's drawing eyeballs in a way that you were not able to do for whatever reason. If it's the style of her game, if it's because she played the hype, whatever. There has to be. It's only normal for there to be jealousy. I'm not surprised that there's jealousy, but at some point, and again, this is new. This is only the start of her second season, so hopefully this does take place for the benefit of the WNBA. Ride that train for as long, because if you're able to ride that train for as long as you can, people will eventually filter into the other areas that they don't know about. She's the thing that has gotten the attention because people have been made aware for whatever reason. And now you have to hope that filters down into other aspects of the sport and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, she is amazing, and she is what's drawing eyeballs, but I'm also interested in this. I'm also interested in that. It's almost like pro wrestling in a way. Like, you might have come in as an Andre the Giant guy, but oh my God, have you seen Andre the Giant? But along the way, this guy, Randy Macho Man Savage, did this amazing interview or so. That's the way I compare it to.
It's the Caitlin Clark trickle down economics.
Absolutely.
Right. You get somebody in the door with something that you have never seen before. And then all of a sudden you start getting interest in other things. And like you said, it's natural with anything, right? Like I'm sure how many people LeBron got into the NBA where it's like, oh, wait, there's this kid who's 18 years old, who's the next coming of Michael Jordan. And he's incredible. And he's playing for his hometown team. Like, wait a second, I'm in. And then, it trickles down into, absolutely. I'm an NBA fan now. So it's good. I love the fact that, especially, having a daughter now, and we're a very big sports household. My wife played volleyball. I play basketball. So it's like, it's only natural for her to be next up and like, all right, baby, what do you want to do? You want to play volleyball? You want to play basketball? You want to play this? You want to play that? You want to do that? Like, what do you want to do? And it's good to have examples for little girls to look up and be like, oh, I like Steph Curry. I like what's going on in the NBA, but then also I see myself in a way where, oh, Angel Reese, oh, Caitlin Clark, oh, Nafisa Collier, oh, whoever, right? You put into that box. It's like, I see myself in their shoes in a way that you and I saw people in the media and be like, oh, one day I could do that.
Yeah.
And now here we are. So it's like, it's very cool to have the representation of I see it, I can be it,
Tony, thank you so much for giving us all this time today. I appreciate it. And hopefully, like one day when the WNBA gets there, hopefully one day the Dolphins get there. That's the only hope that if I have only a little part of my sports soul left to bargain with, it's to get to see the Dolphins actually win a playoff game for the first time in God knows how long.
Well, we got another Pope, so hopefully the Dolphins don't kill this one too, Gordon. Appreciate your time, man.
Thanks, man. All right, time for 3 and out. And look, it took the Mets, 2 months to make Juan Soto miserable. That might be a bit strong, but all the talk about the Mets over the last week has been about Juan Soto. It's been percolating for a little while about his unhappiness, and then it just erupted this past weekend with the Subway Series, first with the report from Bob Clappish that Met brass is troubled by his lack of enthusiasm for his new team. He blew off ESPN over the weekend when he was supposed to be mic'd up on Sunday night, blew off reporters after the game. Monday, the great Michael Kay said he talked to people within the Mets organization and that the reason why Soto's not happy is because he actually wanted to return to the Yankees, but his family felt more comfortable with Steve Cohen and the Mets. And then, of course, last night, moved down in the order to third, hoping that would maybe spur something and get him rolling. And that he's not swinging the bat for some reason. So all the optics, all the results, not good right now. All right, a couple of things about this story and the way people have reacted to it that I find ridiculous. One, that Bob Klapisch put out that report about Met brass not being happy with how Soto is carrying himself, that he put that out there because secretly he's this Yankee operative and he put it out just for clicks. You know, since the development and really the explosion of podcasts, fans can now put themselves in a bubble where there's no criticism of their team is really allowed. You know, in sports talk radio, no matter who the host is, they're going to criticize their team if they're a fan of whatever, when it is warranted. With podcasts, it seems like there's this push now when everything is team-centric that it's overly positive, and if anybody has anything critical to say from the outside that's not part of the fan base, well, that's obviously not true. And this happens with just about every fan base now, especially if it's a fan base that's not tasted success, you know, championship level success for a while. I can confidently say that Bob Klapisch is not just putting stuff out there for clicks. He's not just trying to, engagement farming? He's not trying to parlay this into a guest spot on First Take. The guy's been in the business long enough that he's got a reputation to uphold, so he's not putting something out there that he didn't vet and find to be true. Secondly, this is not some Yankee fan pushed theory. This is not Yankee fans want Juan Soto to fail because he turned away the Yankees and he went to the Mets. It's all out there for everybody to see. It's a national story. ESPN is talking about baseball. You know how hard that is to get ESPN to talk about anything baseball related? And you're telling me looking at this guy, he doesn't look miserable? We have seen what this player looks like. We saw it for a full year last year, and he never acted like this last year. Now, do I think he's going to be like this forever? No, but it's kind of alarming when a guy gets, $750 million and has had a total change of his mood in 2 months playing for a new team. This is not fake news. You know, when Juan Soto is performing like Juan Soto, nobody can say anything about his production. And if this were simply Yankee fans gaslighting Met fans, it would be pretty easy to kind of point out the flaws in that. This is not about optics being twisted or some misinformation campaign. The guy's not performing like he usually does. And we watched him last year with this radiant smile and connecting with fans. And it doesn't seem like he has anywhere near that level of enthusiasm this year. Third thing, I don't care that he didn't hustle on this play or that play. It would be great when you're making as much as he's making that he would be the model franchise player and he was Charlie Hustle, busting it out of the box every play and running hard down the line. I get it, but that's not Juan Soto. And it's mostly not guys in Major League Baseball. And Juan Soto has never been that guy. So he's just being consistent. This isn't a change in who he is. And we'll get into what the Mets bought in Juan Soto, but him not hustling or being a Gold Glove outfielder, that's part of the package. It's not some glitch. This is what you bought. And the biggest mistake you can ever make in free agency in any sport is thinking that by spending more on a guy, he's going to be able to play up to whatever that level is that you paid for. You get what you paid for. The Mets' version of Soto is roughly what Juan Soto is. He's been a little down offensively, but the base running, the fielding, that's just part of the package. And I get it. The Mets are not scoring runs right now. And when you're not scoring runs, the team always kind of looks flat. But the difference in Soto's body language and the swagger he usually carries himself with, that has been the greater difference than his production last season to this season. And it's funny because before last year, when the Yankees acquired him from San Diego, we heard, well, is he still going to do the strut? Can he still show his personality with the corporate Yankees? And it was never an issue last year. And already this year it is. But let's get down to the real point of all this. It's all about production and what the expectations of production were going to be this season. The Mets bought Juan Soto at the peak. If you remove the 2020 season, last year Juan Soto was coming off career highs in home runs, slugging, a career high in OPS plus. He came from the perfect ballpark, hitting in front of the best hitter in the sport since Barry Bonds, all in a contract year while being represented by Scott Boras. And Steve Cohen knew he had to sign Juan Soto. He didn't try to steal Aaron Judge. He lost out on Yamamoto the year before. He had to have Juan Soto at whatever the price. And the price with the Mets means less because apparently there is no budget. But unfortunately, when you're the big free agent signing, people expect you to be the best version of yourself. And when you're coming off a career year, that might be expecting too much. But Juan Soto's going to eventually show up, the real Juan Soto. I would not worry about Juan Soto's production. Everyone forgets every year how long a baseball season is. As bad as Juan Soto's start to his Met career has gotten off to, does anybody remember when Francisco Lindor started with the Mets? That first year was brutal. He was basically a league average hitter that first year. His OPS plus was 100. He was so frustrated he gave the thumbs down to fans publicly on the field and reportedly got into a fist fight with Jeff McNeil off the field. And back then, what were people saying? Francisco Lindor has lost his smile. Maybe it's me, but when you're not producing, I don't really think a guy should be laughing and smiling all the time. I think a lot of this is tied to production. Now, if he's truly unhappy with the Mets, he's got to get over that. The ink's dry, the money's been wired, and it's a done deal for the next decade and a half. But when you're with a new team with the highest of expectations and you've been disappointing, there are not going to be too many smiles. But Juan Soto has a pretty good track record of production, and his production so far is like 2 good weeks away from a typical Juan Soto season. It's only pronounced right now because the Mets are not scoring runs, and their problem has been offense, and their offense really should be carrying the team. So I don't think there's any reason to worry about Juan Soto. Now, if he starts producing and is still miserable, okay, maybe then. But if he's producing, what do I care? And he's going to produce. He will be great. You don't just simply lose that at age 26. Now, if you want something to worry about, save that for down the road, because anything over 15 years is probably not going to age that well. Think about how old you are going to be in 15 years and try not to cry. Think about what you were like 15 years ago. 15 years ago, the AL MVP was Josh Hamilton. That's how long 15 years is. 15 years ago, the Cy Young was Roy Halladay. 15 years ago, the Rookie of the Year was Buster Posey, and he's been retired for 5 years. So yeah, that's the only worry about Juan Soto. When that contract does go south, have the Mets won a World Series or 2 by then? If they have, nobody's going to care about that contract because by then Steve Cohen will probably be paying guys $100 million a year. And if they haven't won 1 or 2 or more than that by then, nobody's going to care about Juan Soto's smile. They'll be too busy wondering why they're not wearing one themselves. All right, number 2, the WNBA has a Caitlin Clark problem, and it's that she's the only player the vast majority of the audience actually cares about. And the jealousy factor last year was off the charts. But last year, as I was talking with Tony earlier, I can kind of understand that, right? You're a WNBA player who's been toiling in obscurity for years, and you are one of the greats at what you do. But you've been basically ignored by the overwhelming majority of sports fans. And here comes this new sensation, this new player, and for whatever reason, she's the only thing the viewing public cares about. It's only natural to be a bit jealous. That's a natural initial reaction. But by year 2, you got to get over that. You got to ride the gravy train and lean into the idea that high tides raise all boats. But then, of course, you have Angel Reese, who is so obviously jealous of everything Caitlin Clark. I mean, if anyone's ever gone onto an injured list with jealousy, she might be the first one, because this obsession that she has with Caitlin Clark, it's not competition. It comes off as desperate. It's jealousy, plain and simple. Reese sees the attention that Clark is getting, the media, the fans, the endorsements, the spotlight, whatever, and she knows she can't touch that on her own. So what's her next best move? To inject herself into the Caitlin Clark conversation at every turn and try to force this rivalry or stir the pot or try to steal a sliver of that attention. But here's the problem. It's not working. It's so transparent. It's so obvious. And it's already year 2 and it's already tired. This isn't Bird versus Magic. This isn't like 2 generational stars pushing each other while growing the game. This is Caitlin Clark. She's playing both those roles. She's Magic and Bird. She's bringing the spotlight and the money, and Angel Reese is just trying to kind of sneak in on the fame. And I get it. Villains are good for the game. Every hero needs an antagonist, but this just doesn't feel organic. It feels forced. It feels petty. And as a casual fan, it's a real turnoff. So if this league wants to grow, if it wants to capture the moment that it's in right now, someone in the WNBA should pull Angel Reese aside and give her a reality check. And it's this: the league's future, right or wrong, is riding on Caitlin Clark. She's not just a player. She is a phenomenon. She has been able to take a league that is 20 years old and draw eyeballs to it in a way that it's not remotely had before. Maybe try supporting that moment in your own way instead of trying to hijack it. Because right now, Angel Reese doesn't look like a rival. She looks like a subplot, and a jealous one at that. All right, then finally, the NFL owners voted on Tuesday to allow NFL players to participate in the 2028 Olympic Games in flag football. And my first and only reaction to this entire story is to bring up the name Robert Edwards. Does anybody remember Robert Edwards? If that name does not ring a bell to you, he was a rookie running back for the Patriots back in 1998. Had a great rookie season, 1,100 yards, scored 9-10 touchdowns. He was a first-round pick. And that year, the NFL decided as part of the Pro Bowl to have like a 4-on-4 flag football game on the beach for some reason. Well, long story short, Edwards tried to make a play, injured his knee, tore all the ligaments, tore a tendon. He also sliced the artery in his leg. Basically, he was never the same. I bring that up because the idea of having NFL players running around playing flag football probably doesn't seem like it's that big a deal, but I'll be the first one to say I would not want my players participating in something that is sports related, that is not NFL, my team related. Are the odds low that they'll get injured playing flag football? Yeah. Are those odds zero? Okay, then I'm out. The Olympics is for all the events that we don't pay attention to any other time. Track and field, gymnastics, water polo. The NFL players have plenty of attention on them all the time. They don't need to go to the Olympics too. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you've not already, please hit a few buttons, like the episode, subscribe to this podcast, all that jazz. It is absolutely essential. Now, we'll be back on Monday. By then, the Knicks and Pacers will be already moving on to Game 4. And I'm sure the series will hold a whole different feel. God, let's hope so. But we'll be back with you next week with a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports.